Conte calls decision to accept Arsenal's request strange. Antonio Conte has labelled the Premier League's decision to postpone the North London derby as strange and claimed the fixture schedule should be adapted rather than games called off if there are genuine concerns about injuries and player welfare. And Conte also accused the league of doing big damage to Tottenham by refusing to reschedule their meeting against Leicester, which ultimately contributed to them being kicked out of Europe. The derby, which was scheduled to take place on Sunday, was called off after Arsenal were hit by a combination of COVID, injury and international call-up issues. At the time, Spurs' big rivals had just one confirmed COVID case, 4 players away at the Africa Cup of Nations and a string of injuries. Spurs manager Conte said, "The club made a statement and I think that the club expressed our disappointment about the decision. It was for sure a strange decision, but I think the club made an important statement to tell about our disappointment for the decision. If the Premier League decides to postpone game for injuries, it means they have to try to make the best schedule and reduce maybe to play games if they don't want injuries or the risk to postpone for injuries. This is the first time in my life that there is a league that postponed the game for injuries. This is very strange and I'm very surprised for this. If someone has to think of the welfare of the players, you have to play less games, and especially you have to play games not every 2 days, 3 days. Otherwise, do you speak about the welfare of the players? It is only an excuse or to tell something stupid in my opinion, because you protect the players by giving them rest to play and rest. But if you want only to play, you can't speak about the welfare of the players. It is very strange here. When there is the situation to play, we have to play and not to postpone game for injuries, for international duty. I think that we have a big problem to solve, that is COVID, but only about this situation can you decide to postpone. For other situations, honestly, this is the first time in my life and I think I have a bit of experience in football to see this type of decision, and it was very strange because this way everything can happen." Spurs were unable to play their final Europa Conference League group game against Rennes following a COVID outbreak. They asked the Premier League to move their trip to Leicester, which will now finally take place on Wednesday, in order to make space to face for a rearranged meeting with the French side. The Premier League refused, though later postponed the game following a subsequent request from Leicester due to their COVID issues. Spurs were eventually unable to agree a compromise date with Rennes, forced to forfeit the tie, and lost their place in the competition. Conte said, "It was a big damage to Tottenham from the Premier League. You have to protect your team and they penalized us in a bad way. We were penalized, and from the Premier League, not from UEFA. Tottenham was dropped off from Conference League because the Premier League didn't want to move the game against Leicester, and then after a request of Leicester, if you remember, they postponed, but Tottenham was dropped from UEFA. The Premier League didn't want to move the game against Leicester. This is the only reason. This is very strange, and in this type of situation there is a big disappointment for us, especially for us, that we work and we love football. We work a lot to try and play this competition, and then it's very difficult to accept this